Welcome back to the Tip of the Iceberg podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. Full disclosure here, Horwat, as we get set to talk about Corey Perry. There is one listener that is in our comment section on YouTube that has been clamoring for Corey Perry basically ever since the Chicago Blackhawks decided to terminate his contract. So that person, deservedly so, we're going to talk about it here. But I was not willing to have this conversation until we got the news that we got last week, that he met with Commissioner Goodell and he was given the green light by the NHL's commissioner. Because for those who don't know, Corey Perry has been absent from the NHL since having his contract terminated by the Chicago Blackhawks back in November. While the exact nature of his misconduct is unknown, we do know that it was nothing criminal. It was more so that it was an off-ice incident involving Corey Perry's behavior that led him to being deemed, I don't remember the exact phrasing, but basically conduct detrimental to the organization. His contract was terminated and he was sent away from the NHL. And at this point, nobody was willing to touch him whenever he was immediately released, because he was eligible to come back. There was no action taken by the NHL to say, hey, this man is not allowed to return to the NHL. It's just nobody was going to touch him, knowing that there was no information given, at least publicly, about what that conduct detrimental was. But now that he's been given the green light by Gary Bettman to resume his career at the National Hockey League level, a step that didn't need to happen, but I think did need to happen in the public eye when it comes to the court of public opinion.
Yep.
So Corey Perry is now technically and officially on the free agent market, and there is a lot of interest surrounding the former NHL Hart Trophy winner. Horwat, you texted me yesterday, simply, thoughts on Corey Perry, ? So let me just shift that and turn it back to you. Nick Horwat, thoughts on Corey Perry for the Pittsburgh Penguins?
You know, it's an interesting case for Corey Perry just because of the baggage that he might bring. The PR, I don't want to say nightmare that he might bring, considering,
but it's a story.
There's definitely a story there. There has been some time for everything to kind of cool off. Again, nothing that no one will know anything that happened. No one will.
Not anytime soon. No.
Not anytime soon. Not anytime, during his playing career, bare minimum. So there is the fact that there's some time separated from the whole saga to now that, you don't want to say people have forgotten about it, but people have moved on. There are other issues to focus on, especially around hockey still. So people are willing and teams are willing to allow Corey Perry back in. For what it's worth, teams have been playing Tony DeAngelo the entire time. So
yeah, I know you're not a big fan of him.
His personality, as a hockey player,
not hockey-wise.
As a hockey player, could be good. Corey Perry, and this is another situation like that. You look at his numbers, you look at his play, and you go, hey, you know what? That's not an awful situation. For the Penguins, he kind of fits. The age, again, is something that we'll get into in a minute, I'm sure. But he kind of fits exactly what the Penguins need and are looking for, especially if you consider now that the early returns on Jesse Puljujarvi may not have been great in the AHL. Riley Smith is now out long term. We don't have official word on all the other details, probably getting them soon. But that really hasn't come down the pipe yet. The Radim Zahornas and the Valtteri Pustinens, they don't look like NHL players anymore. Valtteri Pustinen might in a year or two again, but at this juncture, not so much. So roster spots are opening up on the wings, and slotting in a guy like Corey Perry who brings the grit, he brings the grime, and maybe a couple of depth scoring goals. There are positives to be had with Corey Perry. My overall opinion is I could take it or leave it. I think if you're gonna add, there are other ways you could to the depth forward position. But if he's a cheap option and willing to join this team and obviously play in a lower role that he will, it would be a good move, but also I'm not too worried about the age either. It's just a matter of, like you said, the court of public opinion when it comes to this team and its age.
Yeah, the court of public opinion on this team is it's too old and it needs to only get 22-year-olds. And I don't agree with that, especially when you're looking at a year-by-year basis. Yes, when you're looking to bring in players that have multiple years on their contract, I agree. You want to tend to go younger, but at this stage of the season, you're halfway through, you have 41 games left, you're trying to just make a playoff spot by any means necessary. Corey Perry is a guy that can get you there. I mean, he had 9 points in 16 games this season with the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, I get it. He's playing a first-line role. He's playing a lot of hockey. He's playing on the top power play unit, but maybe a guy like Corey Perry in the net front isn't the worst thing. I mean, he still has the hands. And let's not forget, this guy was, although in Anaheim, a lot of people forgot about it, had one of the best goal-scoring tendencies in the National Hockey League in the early 2010s. He was a guy that could put the puck in the back of the net at will, and him and Ryan Getzlaf were a dynamic duo that not a lot of people gave credit to because they played in Southern California for the Anaheim Ducks. But this is a guy that also brings that worm aspect. I mean, it's his nickname for a reason. He brings that grit. He brings that grime, as you said it. I love that word because
Mm-hmm.
like greasy. He's down there, but he does the work. He does the hard work. And I think that that's something that the Penguins need. And like you mentioned, Valtteri Puustinen was very good upon his call up.
Yeah.
Right now, he's fallen back a little bit, and nobody expects him to come up and at this point become a top six forward and just go off like Jake Gensel did. Very infrequent does that happen, particularly with a 7th round pick. We might have wanted it to happen. I know I certainly wanted it to happen because I've been a big proponent of Valtteri Puustinen. But as you mentioned, the last couple of games, it's not only that he's not scoring, it's the way that he's playing that he's starting to become invisible. His ice time is getting shredded because of it by Mike Sullivan. You bring in a guy like Corey Perry, you know what you're going to put out there on the ice every single night. You know what you're getting out of him every single night. And he's a guy that has made it in this league and has learned how to play in this league from night to night and on a nightly basis as the season prepares and goes on. Whereas Valtteri Puustinen is learning a lot of these things for the first time. So if you're trying to make the playoffs, if Puustinen is struggling, there's no harm in sending him back to the AHL, giving him that reset, and hopefully bringing him back up at some point this season and letting him show once again why he deserves to stay at this level. I mean, even Drew O'Connor right now, a lot of people are saying he's come out of nowhere, and large majority of it has been coming out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's been building. You could see that over the past 4 seasons. It's been building to this point. Now, that's a higher ceiling than I could have imagined. It's a higher ceiling than I expected, but it has been building, and we have been saying, coming into this year, we said, what? It's a big year for Drew O'Connor. It's a year for him to establish himself as an everyday NHL player. This is the 4th season with the organization where he's played NHL games.
Yeah.
Puustinen is at the early stages of that. So when it comes to a guy like Corey Perry, yes, I'm interested in kicking the tires on a guy like Corey Perry, even if he's 38, because you're buying a 38-year-old for 41 games.
Mm-hmm. It's not totally terrible.
The age doesn't fit into that equation for me because it is a 1-year deal. The guy has not played since November, so he has fresh legs, and he's somebody that can help the team based on his skill set and his ability right now. Do I sign him to a 5-year deal? No. It's Corey Perry. He's 38 years old. I sign him to a rest of the season deal and say, this person is going to help us get to the playoffs. Now, is he the guy I'd pick in the free agency? No. I've said on several occasions I like Zach Parise more, but that's just me. But I would say kicking the tires on Corey Perry, 100% an option that I would be willing to approach if I was Kyle Dubas and the Penguins.
Yeah, it's an option that is available and an option that is out there. You're right. You're buying the 38-year-old for what could be his last run, by the way. Let's just be honest with ourselves here, much like the way we look at Jeff Carter, and that the 2023-2024 season is arguably Jeff Carter and likely Corey Perry's final year in the NHL. There's no way Corey Perry wants his NHL tenure, likely Hall of Fame career, to end the way it did. He's going to want to come back into the league. He's going to want to prove to everyone why he deserves that spot in the Hall of Fame and prove that he is more than what just happened in Chicago. Mm-hmm. So he's going to come in to whatever team he joins like a house of fire. He's probably going to come in and be a really good producer. And when it comes to buying the 38-year-old for 41 games, tack on some playoff games, because not that he's has been an outstanding playoff performer in the last couple of years, but 3 straight trips to the Stanley Cup final. And some really good, some pretty decent numbers. Again, like I said, he hasn't been the greatest playoff performer over his career. And during his prime, there's some good years in there. Obviously a Stanley Cup champion, but he was only 21. And I don't remember how much of a role he played in that run. 15 points in 21 games isn't terrible.
Yeah, he was one of their young guns on a
veteran team, though.
That team had a lot of veterans on it. Yeah.
Yeah. But even into last year, Tampa Bay lost in the first round. He had 5 points in 6 games. You take that. That's a good start. The year before with Tampa Bay, 11 points in 23. Again, a run to the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah.
So the points are the production in the postseason is there and it's not.
Mm-hmm.
But you know he's one of those guys, regardless of what the stats and the numbers say.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he's turning it on in the playoffs. You know what's really high in the playoffs for this dude? The penalty minutes.
Yeah.
So
he is the worm.
He's got that grit to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, but like you said, I mean, it all dates back to the simple phrase, he still has the hands. And if you could have the hands and bring that dimension of, he's grimy, he's good in the net front, he's somebody that's going to get under opposing team skin, maybe get you some power plays, which, if you could capitalize on them, that'd be even better. But that's something I'm sure we'll talk about in the next segment, talking about biggest surprises. But no, I mean, if he's cheap, why don't you kick the tires on him? If you're the Pittsburgh Penguins, you look at the wing options right now. Puustinen, with him struggling on the left side with Smith out, like you mentioned, Nieto is out as well, and Jansen Harkins is not a guy that I want to lift above the fourth line. Like he's turned into a half decent fourth liner, but he's not anything more than that, even at his best. Yeah. And you look at the minors and you're looking at some of these options and you're saying, well, I mean, maybe it would have been nice to have Rem Pitlick now, but oh well, like who cares? Like he was doing fine at the AHL level, but did he really fit into Mike Sullivan's style? Not much. Not a lot of defense.
Cost too much.
Yeah, it was over $1 million.
Yeah,
but you look at the options. Would you rather have Perry or Vinny Hinostroza? Probably Corey Perry. I mean, I get it. Perry's a right wing. You'd have to move somebody to their off wing potentially, or just bump Valtteri Puustinen down. But
and I haven't
probably
taken
Corey Perry.
Yeah, and I haven't taken wings too much into consideration in this, considering what we saw all training camp. I've said this 1,000 times already. Mike Sullivan wants his wingers to be able to play both sides.
Yeah, Puustinen can play the left.
Yeah, so maybe Corey Perry can also do something like that, or even if not, wherever he slots in, someone else bumps to the other side. There are moves that can be made within the wingers. So when it comes to the Penguins adding, this can go for the trade deadline, this can go for free agency signings. Mm-hmm. Don't worry about the wing position. This team seems to be flexible enough to move wings to the side. There are only certain players that have just one position under their belt, and it's not many.
Yeah, the only one that I can think of off the top of my head, at least in the upper parts of the lineup, because Jeff Carter can move to center, but Jake Gensel's the only one that I don't think you'd see on the right wing, but he can also move to center if you need him to.
If you really need him to.
Not that he's done that in the last 8 years, but you could technically, he's a natural center, so you could technically move him there. So there's flexibility there, but not on the whole way over to the right side. But now Perry's an interesting case, and I'm sure we'll see a lot of stories circulating about Corey Perry and interest for him in the NHL. But if you're the Pittsburgh Penguins, you got to find something. You got to get something to put yourself over the top. You got to find something to help stabilize your bottom six and bring consistent scoring from the bottom six, because you look right now, the last couple of games, Lars Eller hasn't been scoring. Valtteri Puustinen hasn't been scoring. I don't expect Radim Zohorna to score. And then you look at the fourth line, Achari, who's banged up, it seems like all the time because of the way he plays. I mean, the dude's a warrior, but it's not conducive to staying in the lineup. And Jeff Carter, while he does score in timely moments, doesn't score as often. He scores at the rate of a fourth liner. So you need a little bit more scoring punch, and I think Corey Perry brings something which, I mean, the underlying numbers are also pretty good for Corey Perry throughout his career. So, I don't think that that's something that should be dismissed as an option for the Pittsburgh Penguins.